Max Orr, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well. Can you believe it? After hours, days, weeks, let's be honest, it's probably closer to months, you've been putting time, energy and effort into your fantasy football side for the 2024 season. It is about to all come crashing to a head with round one under 100 hours away, opening round in the rear vision mirror, and so much to discuss and apply from that weekend of football as we head into opening round for fantasy football coaches with the traditional Thursday night match of Carlton versus Richmond, and then the rolling lockout gets underway. Joining me on this podcast, I had to get a couple of members of the Coaches Panel that aren't not just going to give you great advice, because you always get that with the Coaches Panel podcast, but guys that have been there, done that, and won it. So some premium advice that's going to helpfully just tip you over the edge to become a champion in your preferred format of choice. The winner of 2020 Dream Team and fellow co-founder of the Coaches Panel. Back on the podcast again, it's Rids, mate. Hello, how are you?
Hey, mate. How you going? It's a long time ago now.
Well, it's been a while, but look, it's still inside a handful of years, so let's count that. And then a member of the Coaches Panel we introduced you to late last year. He has gone back-to-back in hat territory for AFL Fantasy. He went it just a couple of seasons ago. It's Matt Mottram. Hello, mate. Nice to have you back on the Coaches Panel podcast and your first strategy episode for us in 2024.
Yeah, it's good to be here, MJ. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, excited to see another season about to launch.
It's a fascinating time of year. It is where squads are made and squads are broken. But Rids, I'll start with you. We've been given something uniquely different this fantasy footy season that we've never seen before. An opening round, 4 matches, 8 teams, and a price movement that has started a week ahead of the season actually moving for us. We'll talk about the price movements in a moment, but there's a lot of learnings. And as a result of those 4 games, there's probably a lot of reactions and potentially overreactions. What's your sentiment from what you took away as a broad statement from those 4 games of footy? Was there any key learnings that the fantasy community, from your perspective, can take out of those 4 games?
I think we entered opening round with a real distinct lack of premium forwards going forward. What happened, though, was we seemed to be leaving the round with potentially 2 premium forwards that we would never have had. And one of them didn't even really play in opening round. It's kind of crazy, yeah?
You're, of course, alluding to Luke Jackson with, at time of this podcast recording, he's been not confirmed by the club, but media reports says he's going to miss anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks of football. So that really puts it into an interesting conversation where previous reports were just 3 to 4 weeks. And then an Isaac Heaney that you're alluding to. I got to ask you, Rids, because there's some strategy stuff I want to ask Matt off the back of that. But is Isaac Heaney just an absolute, you've got to pick him based on the fact that we've got a price movement that is known based on that scoring, and he's got that midfield role? Is he just a, yep, go and pick him, or is it not as simple as saw it, it's going to hold and pick it?
It's definitely not as simple as that, okay, MJ? So it's going to be team specific, radio. But you think about it. If I say to you round 5, what's the first thing you think of, MJ?
I think of 2 teams on a bye when you say round 5.
Yeah. And one of them might be Sydney. Okay. So we're looking at some really, really popular guys, okay, across the board. Matty Roberts just went berserk. He's going to be one of those names. We're going to have an Isaac Heaney. We're going to have a James Jordan. We're going to have a Brodie Grundy. How many of these guys is too many? That's going to be the problem, yeah? And if we have start all of them, how are we going to trade out of them if we cop a bullet or something along the way? As we know it happens, yeah? Every year it happens. Like poor Matt last year had it happen twice in the first round. Like, I mean, that's how common bullets happen.
Yeah, they're there. So Matt, talk to me about Luke Jackson and Isaac Heaney, more in a big conceptual space where Rids has alluded that this time 7 days ago were largely under the radar and not even on the radar for a lot of the fantasy footy community. Whereas now they're potentially trying to go from squeezing no premium forwards in. I'm using that term loosely, by the way, no premium forwards into potentially two. Is this an overreaction from a strategic perspective? If you've loved the strategy, you've found a structure that you like, and then all of a sudden, 2-3 days out from round one, you're changing it. Is that a good approach, or is that just using the information that you have to help you with your side?
I don't think it's a bad thing. If you can throw a few things around in the team and fit them in, I don't think it's a bad thing. If they got a good role and you know they're going to score well, then you'd have to at least consider them. And the way I think about it, is it someone, if you don't have them, could they take the game away from you? I know I've spoken to Rids about that. Are they a player that could score that well that they're going to get away from you and help other teams get ahead of you? And those are sort of the competition winning picks. And if you don't have them early, then, you can fall behind very quickly. So you could get on them early and start them, or you could wait and maybe pick one of them and see if the other one pops and jump on, have a way to pivot onto them. So there's a couple of options you could do, I think, there. But I think with Jackson, I was a bit unsure because he was 3 to 4 weeks with Darcy out, but just hearing it could be longer makes him a lot more enticing, I think.
Yeah, you throw that dual position component, you throw that, we know in AFL fantasy, he's basically been at Fremantle, a flatline ton average when he plays without Darcy. He's up towards 120 in Supercoach, which is just crazy for those that play that format. And he doesn't have one of those early buy rounds, which again means, yes, his price movement is already in theory in motion. I'm alluding to Isaac Heaney and any players that have played in opening round, whereas Jackson, he's going to help you through every one of those weeks. Rids, was there any other big learnings that you took out of opening round? Heaney does feel like one of the big takeaways in terms of structural change and player changes, but was there other big obvious reactions, or on the other side, overreactions from this fantasy community about what we saw and could potentially take away from opening round?
I know there's a lot of talk about it, okay, but we went into it going, we started this preseason going, any premium with a buy round, just ignore them. We just can't start them. But I tell you what, you throw up 130 or something from a Lockie Whitfield and he's the talk of the town, yeah? So what it does do is it puts everyone back on the agenda. We can actually start trading these people. But I do have to pull this out, MJ, and I'll try and be as nice as I can, yeah? It was only a week ago, Errol Gulden was the talk of the town because of a practice game, rightio. Rightfully, he's no longer the talk of the town, the flavour of the month, because of that lower score. That's another learning. We can't be expecting what happened last week to be this week as well. So you've got to manage your expectations, yeah? So someone like a Gold Coast, I don't expect Matty Rowell to have 20 clearances next week in the game of football.
No.
Rightio. You shouldn't. Richmond were just that poor. And I can't say it nicely. I'm a Richmond supporter. I sat through that game. They were awful in that first half. They could barely do anything. But for a guy like Matty Rowell, 20 clearances, mate, that's just ridiculous, okay? So, but if you're going to trade into him or you're going to have him, manage your expectations. He's not going to have that sort of outlier, best pop game of his career week in, week out. That's the sort of learnings I have. The other thing I want is there was a pretty big points difference between Gold Coast and Richmond. So, that just shows how one-sided it was at times in that game. It was almost as if it was uneven, like there was one team going well, one team not even trying, or severely out of form for that first half. So just manage it. Like a Connor Budrick, for instance, he did pretty good. But I heard people going, oh, yeah, da-da-da-da. But the thing is, he's actually done okay. He did his job. What do you need to see out of the guy? He what was that, 88 in the end, I think, for AF?
Yeah, I think it's about high 80s in
Supercoach.
AF 90 and Supercoach, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we got to make sure we're all saying it's a cheat sheet, yeah? It's a cheat code. Yeah, well, let's be real about this. It's no good being a cheat code and then coming up and saying, oh, yeah, but just ignore that cheat code because that doesn't make sense, yeah? So the thing is, take it, but take it for what it's worth. Don't go reading too much into it. It's not like Connor Budrick is going to come out and average 90 for the year because otherwise everyone's on him, yeah? So I think be a bit, cautious with that, but work your team to see whether he's going to be working for you. Because there is a world that he could start in some teams, even though he's got an early buy. He's got a decently low break even. He's pretty useful. What was it? Dibba referred to him as the Jaden Short of the Gold Coast team. I don't think he's going to be targeted like ever as the distributor. So there is a world that he's going to be useful, but manage it. Don't expect him to be 90s. Expect him to be 70s and see whether it works for your team. Don't just do it blindly because so-and-so said so.
Yeah. I'm seeing a bunch of overreactions might be a strong terminology, but gosh, we're in the content creation space. If you're not making some kind of wildish statement, where do you belong, hey? But seeing a lot of people wrestle with Nick Dacos a lot this preseason, Matt. It feels like it probably makes sense why we put him at number 1 in the 50 most relevant. He's that kind of guy that you can build this compelling case for not starting him and the upgrade cadence and a probable cheaper price point, the early buy, Finn McGuinness tag. Equally, you can look at the vice captaincy loopholes, the scoring increase with him now being a predominant, if not an almost exclusive midfielder. It still feels like, Matt, he's this player that's defining a lot of people's preseasons. Will I, won't I? And while cows and value ultimately determines our structure to an extent, I'm seeing a lot of teams really, Dacos at D1 or not, is changing the entire makeup of what that side looks like. Do you have a reflection on Nick Dacos? Maybe not to talk someone in or out of him, but something to you as you just kind of look at it and have won AFL Fantasy a few seasons back now. What do you do with a player like Dacos that ultimately changes so much of your structure?
Yeah, he's a tough one. Look, he's a gun player. We know he's a champion fantasy player too, and there's no denying that. So I think a lot of people who missed out on starting him last year might have that FOMO with Dacos. So if you missed starting him last year, you might be really think, I don't want to be on that same train again and not have him. But last year he was a lot cheaper. And this year he's priced a lot higher. So like if it was me, straight out, I wouldn't start him. Simple as that. I just wouldn't start him this year. I think with the buy and the possible tag and the value we have elsewhere, and even, we'd have cash left over after that value we can spend up on other lines. It doesn't have to be Dacos. There's guys who can score similar to Dacos. So if it was me, I wouldn't start him, just simple as that. But I can understand why people want to start him because he's a gun. And we saw it on the weekend, how he can just amass possessions and how great of a player he is. So, yeah, I don't know what else I could add to that, but, yeah, I think I wouldn't start him.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough too. Rids, there's some players that have clearly caught our attention through opening round, and then there's probably some that have just snuck under the radar just that little bit. We've all seen the Isaac Heaney. We all knew and observed about what could and will happen when it comes to a Luke Jackson, a Lockie Whitfield that Matt's alluded to earlier, really put himself on people's radars, let alone others. But is there one or two players for you that you watched them in opening round and went, geez, they're sneaky as good as any of these other value selections or upside selections that people are considering? Was there one or two players that you wouldn't mind sharing with the coaches panel community that could potentially help them out as they venture into round one?
So there was one game, and it's a bit hard, okay, because GWS had this great game and everything else, but there's three names that I noticed from that GWS Collingwood name that I thought were going to get a lot of talking points coming out of it. And that was Josh Kelly, who looked as good as I have seen him.
My boy.
He's Jaden Popowski a couple of weeks ago said the greatest indicator was handball receives. Well, Josh Kelly had 22 kicks in this game of football and only 4 or 5 marks. So there's a lot of handball receives involved in that. He looks great. And he's only priced at 97, I think, MJ, from memory. So, I mean, that's got to represent value if he stays on the park, yeah? So the second one was Lockie Ash. I know the other Lockie in the back line, Lockie Whitfield, has been talked up to days, but I'll tell you what, Lockie Ash looked amazing, I thought, in that game, but no one seems to be referring to him at all. And I know he's just at that age now where he's actually ready to break out as well. Like, he's probably just a little bit past the age, but this kid is ready to break out. He's ready to go. Harrison Himmelberg is an interesting name for me because I can tell you now, MJ, he's got a little bit of history in this role over the last couple of years. Even last year, he was only 500 and then started going up in price when he got this role. He looked amazing, I thought. And I don't know whether it was just that stupid new hair or whatever it was, but he stood out, in this game of football. So they're just three names that I thought, wow, what do we got here? Do you want to name one more? Darcy Cameron.
Yeah, good shout.
How good did he look in this game? He was the Darcy Cameron I think we wanted 2 years ago. You know what I mean? When he had that DPP. But he looked absolutely crazy good, mate.
I'm surprised at the lack, and Matt, you nodded ahead, your head there along with this Darcy Cameron reflection. It feels like if people are chasing the value of a Tristan Cherry or a Brodie Grundy, and both present undeniable value based on what we think they're going to do in contrast to their price point. But Darcy Cameron looked as good as any ruckman in that game. And Kieran Briggs is not an easy ruckman to beat, is he?
Yeah, not really. I think, what's Cameron priced at? What's his starting price?
He's only about 30 to 40,000 different to Brodie Grundy in AFL Fantasy, and he's a little bit cheaper in Supercoach from the top of head.
Yeah,
I can tell you what he's priced at. So just give me a second, AF. I'll just quickly punch it into my calculator. He's priced at 83, 84.
There you go.
I mean, he's not going to get 130 every game, is he? So he looked good, but in what world do we think Darcy Cameron's going to average 120?
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Yeah. And so on that, we do have these players that we do want to talk about price movements and formulas soon, but we know in Supercoach and Dream Team, if you played in opening round, your 3-week cycle commences, which means at the end of round 2, should you be playing from opening round 1, round 2, you will start to see your price movement early. So that's there. Whereas AFL Fantasy, there's been a little bit of to and fro over the past sort of 24 hours, but they have confirmed. Yes.
MJ, before you do that, I'm sorry, this is hot off the press, okay? So Jaden just shared me the handball receive stats for round 0.
Please.
So once again, he said this is the most important stat in determining a breakout. Josh Kelly was at the top of this list at 15 handball receives for this game of football.
Wow.
This is crazy numbers. Obviously, we expect a Nick Dacos and a few others, but for Josh Kelly to be at the top of the list, that's crazy. Jack Viney's the interesting one on this list. He's actually come in at 2nd or 3rd. at 14, mate. So that's a very interesting one. Tuke Miller also had 14 handball receives.
Wow.
These are the guys that really jump out, yeah? When we look at numbers, sometimes we lose a bit of focus, but these are the numbers that really hit home, I reckon. So I just wanted to call them out because I did mention it a minute ago.
No, it's a really good shout. And, what I was alluding to for you there, Matt, was we've got these guys that at least we know we've got a version of guaranteed price movement. I know I use that term very, very loosely because ultimately in Supercoach and Dream Team, it depends on what happens over the next fortnight. For AFL Fantasy, anything they have gained from this 1 week can very, very quickly be undone with what happens in round 2. How aggressive should we be going after players, and maybe using Darcy as the illustration rather than the point specifically, but these guys that you go, I only am thinking about a 4-week focus here, and I really don't care, and I'm just going to value up what I saw in opening round and bank in that quote-unquote guaranteed price score movement. Like I said, that can be undone with what happens in round 1. Should we be aggressive with these guys, especially knowing they've got a buy and they give us that avenue off? Does that become a viable strategy, or is that layered with some concern for you?
Oh, look, I like playing aggressive. That's how I won, and that's probably been good and bad for me. But I don't know if I would go every one of these guys, because everyone who played around 0, they're all going to have an early buy. So if you jump on a lot of these guys and put them in your side just for the cash rise, then you're going to get caught out, I think, because there's going to be a few bullets early. You're going to want to do a few upgrades here and there and jump onto someone and pivot to get on these hot guys. And if you got all of these guys that are having price rises in your team just for the price rise, you're going to get caught out, I think, with a lot of these buys early. And we still don't know how these early buy rounds are going to play out strategy-wise. Like, what is that fine balance? We're going to look back at the end of the year and we're going to have, an example of how someone did it to win the competition. We don't have that now. So we're all guessing at what that sort of balance is. So if it was me, I'd be very careful to have too many of these guys. But guys who fit in your team, like I really like an Isaac Heaney, and I think he's a guy who could score really well. And he fits in that forward line as a premium, and could easily pivot off him or a Jackson to a Flanders. There's lots of avenues to do those sorts of things. So I don't mind it, but I wouldn't do it everywhere in my team because I think it just could end up in disaster.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of 2 avenues I want to take this conversation, and I think both are valuable. So we want to make sure we come back to it. But Rids, earlier you mentioned around this abundance of Sydney players at round 5. You mentioned Roberts, you mentioned Heaney, you mentioned Grundy, you mentioned, alluded to a few others. And then there's the Collingwood inclusion in this round 5 buy. So you've got this, probably the 1 week that's later on that we're maybe not too much worried or thinking about, going, I'll deal with those 5 or even as many as 6 kind of players from that week off. I kind of want to bring the conversation back to a Dacos, more not about Dacos, but more around him. Gulden was disappointing in opening round in terms of score, and so was Clayton Oliver. Maybe more understandable given what he's been through this offseason and a lack of fitness. We now have names and profiles of players to what we knew would happen for us around round 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which was gun players that we know we want to maximize owning, that we're going to get, depending on the timing and the format, 100, 150,000 cheaper. So a Gulden and Oliver are very much on the menu for us now. But now that you know these names and players, does that change the way you view premiums that are missing a buy later on, whether it be a Dacos, whether it be a Gawn, so to speak, or whether it be a Tom Green? Does these names of players change the way you view your selections in your starting squads, or does that mean nothing to you?
No, I think it's got to, but I think it's a couple of layers to this, okay, this discussion. There's a way that you can actually leverage these guys because people are going to stay away from them as much as possible. So if you think, let's just go back to Gulden for a sec, okay? Sure. I understand that Gulden's going to drop in price, okay? We get that. We know that people are going to go away from him, but people were jumping onto him only a week ago because of the points capacity and the potential out of the guy. Nothing's changed, MJ. He's still got the same ceiling. He's still got the same draw. So if you want to leverage a Gulden, I'm not saying it's a great work like because of the price being dropping, getting him cheaper later. I'm just using him as an example, for instance. Everyone's jumping off on him, okay? If you think, you know what, I want to actually have that unique guy with that ceiling as a captain option, as a VC option through those best 18 weeks, why not? Why not actually explore that? Just because there's a buy happening coming up in the first 5 or 6 rounds doesn't mean that you should be shying away instantly. You should be exploring every opportunity. So his low ownership might mean that if you've got the appetite for it and you jump on, and if he pops, that's going to get you a leg up like no other. It doesn't matter what happens between now and then because you're not really planning on trading out of them at any stage because that's the idea of it. So that's where it comes into it, MJ, to have a real good fun with that.
Yeah. Does it change your way, though, using a green at a day cost, then going, I actually know the players that are in my upgrade plans? Because sometimes when it's just this vague mist of, I'll get a cheaper premium in 6 weeks, it's kind of hard to feel like you know what to do. It's a concept and a construct.
And you're 100% correct. No, it just doesn't. But the thing is, be aware of it. Because guess what? Everyone's going to be traded into him after round 5. So that might go, you know what, that gives me 2 trades to utilize that everyone else is going to be using to get the guy that I already own. And I mean, that does work at times. That's what Guns and Rooks was all about. That's why there's that messaging from years ago of trust your premiums, back them in, you selected them for a reason, they'll come good. You know what I mean? That's the same sort of concept, It means pretty much if people are going to trade into them, you've already owned them. You can do other things. And with AF, where it's trade, use them, lose them trades each week, you can actually utilize them because what happens is in round 6, who's to say, that someone from Collingwood has a -40 break even, ready to jump on, everything else. And that might mean you miss Gulden for that instance. Or that might mean you get another bullet and you have to go fix that one first. And it doesn't get you a Gulden at that point in time. So there's ways around this. It's not just one way skins the cat. Although with AEF, what we do is we got to follow the leader group think mentality often across all of the board with the serious coaches, mind you. Because really, we're talking about the serious, 5, 10,000 teams that take it way too serious, that have probably spent 2 months worth of preseason research already, that are disappointed what's happened in the last 24 hours with pricing. All the casuals, they don't care, mate. They have no interest in all of that. No. But guess what? It doesn't mean Gulden's not going to come out and average 115 over the next 4 weeks until he's by. And if he does, who cares about the price in that instance? Because you're only going to really, save 70,000? And those 2 extra trades that people are using to get on him after his buy, you can make up that 70, 80,000 with those 2 trades.
I think that's the beauty of all of these formats, isn't it, Matt, is while a starting squad is important and you do want to set yourself up for success, ultimately it's what you do from this time next week. As long as you've got a reasonable base, you can really make some amazing, impressive moves. And so as important as your starting selections are, they generally aren't season defining.
No, 100% agree with that. The year I won, I had a really good squad, but I had to make a few correction trades in the first few rounds. And then it was my trading after that set me up. And even last year, copping, as Rids alluded to earlier, I copped 2 bullets. And it was what I did with that, the way I worked around it and pivoted. That's what set me up. And then the trades from then on. So it really is a trading game unless you start a team with too many disasters that cannot be fixed easily. Then you're in trouble. So having a reasonably vanilla team, I don't think it's a bad thing. But you still want to have maybe just 1 or 2 differences that you're sort of backing your gut on, that you're really strong on. I think you want to start those ones because it's those 2 little differences that that can also set you up as well. But it's definitely a trading game, I think.
So when you talk about, a point of difference and separation, is there, in your eyes, is there like a percentage indicator that you're looking for to kind of hit that? I know it's hard when there's the general population that sits in the overall percentage. And like Rid says, it's actually a narrower field you're probably going up against, to be fair. Is there a percentage indicator for you that helps you to define a POD?
Rids might be better speaking about this than me, but we came up with a few learnings, or Rids did specifically, when we worked together last year. And I don't know, Rids, do you want to speak on the ownership, or where do you want to leave that one?
Yeah, the ownership is good, but I think we ended up with about 30% ownership is the tip over to popular, like where it's, and then it all becomes about the upside of the player as well. Like Matt said it earlier, yeah, it's about the hurt factor. If you think someone's got 10 points upside at that level, like the premium level, and they're owned by over 30%, that hurt factor goes through the roof, yeah? So if you think about a Heaney, MJ, and we've all seen this, how many times have we been fooled by a Heaney over the last 10 years, yeah?
10.
Let's go get fooled out again. He is a beast in this midfield role, yeah?
Yeah.
Absolutely, but he's in that midfield role. He's got 10 points upside, yeah? So if he tips over to 30%, and he pops, wow, we're in a bit of danger, yeah? That's got hurt factor for days. It doesn't matter if he's got an early buy or not. That's going to hurt your ranking, and it may even hurt the ability to pull those points back later on in the season. I think that was it, wasn't it, Matt? About 30% all up was the popular?
I think you're right. Spot on there.
So if that's the marker, just using AFL Fantasy, I also got Supercoach. These are I'm using premium as a generally loose term, but it's the mindset of people are going, I think they're going to score like a premium at the very least. I want to use that are at that 30% or above, just for name's sake, in AFL Fantasy over this marker. Max Gawn, Marcus Bontempelli, Harry Sheasel, Hayden Young, Brodie Grundy, Nick Dacos are all over that 30% marker, while over in Supercoach, there's a bunch more of them as well. You've got an Errol Gulden, 40%, by the way, at time of recording. So that'd be interesting to see what that's like in round one. Hayden Young, Marcus Bontempelli, Harry Sheasel. You've also got to throw a Brodie Grundy, Max Gawn, and a Nick Dacos in there. Those are the players that hit that magical 30% and above high that have that hurt factor and the high ownership. Some interesting names, and not surprisingly across the formats, some similar names there too.
And it's not about 10 points upside from that price range, okay, for the year. It's over a period of time.
Yeah, it's good.
We know that it's going to be maybe 4-5 rounds before round 5, round 6 buys come in. And I just want to mention about Max Gawn. Now, I alluded the fact about a Darcy Cameron before. That wasn't because I was talking about Darcy Cameron's relevancy. That was because of who he played against. MJ, who did Darcy Cameron play against?
Kieran Briggs.
Who plays Kieran Briggs in round 1?
Maybe that you're bringing it up around Max Gawn might have something to do with their opponent this week.
It's actually
Maybe.
Tristan Cherry.
The cherry bomb.
So he's the option apart from Gawn. That's at that price point of 580. So if you were going, you know what, you can't line up Gawn versus Cherry, okay? Because I think most of the people are going to flip back over to Grundy, and Grundy's going to be your R1, R2, one of them, okay? Because his performance on the weekend was amazing.
It's very good.
The fact is, if you're trying to decide between Gawn and Cherry, it can't be just a 1 versus 1, because there's 400 or 300,000 in price difference there. But not just that, there's also a matchup. And there's actually a matchup that's now been proven as very easy as per DFS Australia ruck stats, and it's actually leaning towards a Tristan Cherry. So, MJ, have a quick look through the AFL prices. Who's the most likely to score 90 in that $580,000 range?
Well, there's not a whole lot of names, but Cherry sits nicely in there. If you go 100,000 either way, you're starting to give some other ones, but around that price point, Cherry's got the best scoring potential, best role security, and as you've now alluded to, potentially the best matchup.
So that's where it's going to be interesting, yeah? Because I think we all agree Gawn's going to be 10 points upside. Okay, he's priced at 93. I think we all agree he's going to go at 105 at the very worst. So there's 10 points upside. But he does have an early buy. And his price range has got a lot more options around it. So it might be the fact, and it doesn't have to be ruck to ruck, okay? It could be mid to ruck. It could be defense to ruck. It could be a Harry Sheasel, for instance. It could be a Jai Newcomb. It could be an LDU. They're all around that same price bracket of what Gawn is. It doesn't have to be. So it's a combination. How many times have we said this over the years? It's often the combination. So go and do your research out there and go, who sits with Cherry? And then if you want to start Gawn, by all means, that's a great choice, yeah? Who sits with Gawn at the same price combined as the other two? And work out which one you feel more comfortable with, if that makes sense, as the price outlay. And if it's Gawn, by all means, go and back him and get him right. Because you know what? He's a gun, mate. He looked like he was not even close to his best game on the weekend and still got, 90? Like, I mean, we're talking about the top echelon of guns, yeah, in the ruck line. But do your research. This is what preseason's all about, yeah, MJ?
100%.
I was going to add something.
Jump in, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to add in, why can't you start all three?
We're back
and
here.
We know that DT Lemon is very big on this. He tweeted it earlier in the year. And I think, to be fair, okay, I've been chatting. I'll give you a little bit of a,
behind the
secret,
curtain look. Here we go.
I've been talking to DT Lemon the last couple of weeks about what it looks like, because he actually got me very interested in exploring it. I may end up going a different way, but it's actually viable what he's suggesting. And what a surprise that the king of building cash comes up with something that everyone goes, nah, I don't feel comfortable about that. And guess what, mate? It's actually viable to make a lot of cash. So it's up to everyone else. Have they actually explored it properly? I don't know. I definitely did. And I actually found a team that I like with 3 rucks in it, believe it or not.
Yeah, wow.
But I actually like the other team better. So I'm going to go option B. But that's not because the 3 rucks isn't going to work. I believe it will.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me either. DT Lemon, that's the handle. You can go and find him on the social media platform of X. There is not many coaches I know or have seen in the past 3 years that, as Rids has mentioned, just finds a way to get his team value at insanely high levels, almost quicker than anybody else. He's incredibly smart and switched on coach. And so when somebody in the community that's had some success goes, what about this? Even if you don't pursue it, you've at least got to consider it before you go there. I do want to talk about some buy round stuff with you in a minute, Rids, but I'm curious, Matt, there's been a player that I think 2 weeks ago in the community we were very, very bullish on as a community. I'm alluding to Zach Butters. And then with a rolled ankle in the community series, and off the back of that, confirmation was, he actually did a very similar innocuous roll of his ankle at training a fortnight or so before. A lot of the active coaches in the community just went, want no part of an injured guy in the preseason. I'm out. The club have come out and Zach himself on a Monday afternoon and said, I'm playing against West Coast. If you are on the Zach Butters train before the roll of the ankle, is this enough to get you back on the train, or is it not as simple as that? Is there more complexities, or is Zach Butters just somebody you don't need anymore?
It brings something to mind from last year. I think Tim English had a bit of a hammy in the preseason. And I remember a lot of people that scared a few people off, and look, he was the best starting ruck pick of the year. So, these things could come back to haunt us, or they may not. It's just one of those things we don't know the answer to. For me, knowing that he rolled his ankle a couple of times, it just adds enough risk that I'd rather not pick him. But picking him could be the move that actually helps you start the season well, because he could come out fine like English did and score some big games. We know he's got a big ceiling. We know he's got an appetite for the contest, an appetite for the ball. He's a great player to watch. So it'd be fun owning him, especially if he was a low-owned player and he came out killing it to start the season. But I don't know if I could do it after that, but he's not a bad pick.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. One of the reasons people were looking at Zach was the nice early fixture of matchups and helps you through these early bye rounds where you've got over a 6-week block, 4 of the rounds, 2 teams are missing. And Rids, you mentioned it right at the top of this episode. There's a bunch of premium guys that did score well for us that are genuine premiums and are missing some early weeks of football due to a bye round. You could throw a bunch of names in here. I'm not going to put Heaney there because I think you could argue while scoring like a premium, there's a lot of value that's sitting there in contrast. I'm more alluding to Dacos. I know we've talked about him a bit, but maybe a Tom Green and a Lockie Whitfield amongst others that are genuine premiums that scored like premiums. You could probably put Sam Flanders in that consideration if you'd really like to. There's a bunch there. But what do we do from an ownership perspective? These are players that are now, from now till round 24, should they play every week, will miss 2 weeks. Everybody that didn't play an opening round will only miss 1, but they are a week behind in their price movement cadence. How do we leverage this from your perspective? For better or for worse, either way, what does this mean? Because there's a high ownership percentage of some of those guys that will miss games early in the first 6 weeks of the year. How could we exploit's the wrong term, but I'm going to use it. How do we maximize that for us in the community to get ahead of the pack? Whether we pick players in that or not, what should we be doing with this ownership leveraging?
It's a really hard one to gauge because this could go either way, MJ. This is what we've been talking about for the last 10 years of Coaches Panel, yeah? With the high ownership comes massive risk when that guy has a huge ceiling. Because if they start popping that ceiling, it's very hard to watch. We saw it with Nick Dacos last year, okay? I know that he was priced more reasonably than this year, but the fact is, it's a hard watch when you're not watching guys with a monster ceiling. Tim English was another perfect example last year. A lot of people faded him early, hoping to get him a bit cheaper later due to that hamstring. And what happened was he exploded. And not only did he explode, he was clearly the number one captain option over the course of the first whatever rounds. It was just ridiculous how good this guy was to start the year last year. It hurts, mate, taking on these ownership guys. It really does. But it all depends on who you're selecting. And often it's not just the one person you're selecting, it's often the combination again. Because we're talking about guys who are priced at 110, 115, whatever else, okay? Who are you choosing differently to that? Now, you might choose to go up, MJ. Let's just say Tom Green. You might go, you know what? I'm not comfortable with anyone below him. But you know what? I like Marcus Bontempelli. So maybe it's that, but it's also the combination then. Who were you going to select with Tom Green? It might have been a Jordan Clark, for instance. Okay. So who are you going to select with a Bontempelli then? It might be a Budrick. Okay. If that might give you more comfort, like than the other two, who knows, Radio? It's going to be the eye of the beholder, the beauty that we're going to see out of these guys. And it's going to be about what is their comfort level, because it's risky both ways with these high ownership, high ceiling guys. And you know why they're priced like that, MJ? Because they're bloody good, yeah?
Scorers, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, don't ever forget, Clary Oliver was threatening to take the year away from us over the first, 6, 7 rounds of football last year?
Yeah, first 10 weeks of the year, it didn't matter how good your team value was going. You were watching Oliver tear at a park going, I don't care how much I'm going to make. I don't know if I'll ever get my hands on him.
And then you look at the flip side, though. The people that started led, like, it's the flip side. So there's your two flip sides. It's that 50-50 call that goes one way or the other. And often it's only going to be 100 points, 200 points. It's not going to be earth-shattering, but it feels like it. I don't know about you, MJ. I don't know about how many times I messaged you last year starting Hayden Young over Nick Dacos at the same price point.
It was every quarter for the first 5 weeks.
This guy, can someone just go and tag him, for God's sake, yeah? Like Finn McGuinness the first time, I was 100% convinced he's going to Nick Dacos the first time last year. Nope. It's like sometimes the stars just align. Yeah. You just get the rub off the green. You just got to take it, yeah, when that happens.
Yeah, no, it's a good shout. Last two things before we wrap up this episode. We will have a Q&A episode with Mini Monk that'll be dropping inside the next sort of 30 hours or so, which will be our final preseason podcast. So you'll be able to get your hands on that. Make sure you go to our social media platforms with the details for those places are in the description of this episode. You can get your question in and Monk will answer them. But we do need to talk about price movements and price cycles. And if you've been on the social media platform of X, you've certainly seen a lot over the past 30 hours. We don't need to dive too much into the rabbit holes of nuances of who's and how's and where's, but it is an important factor for us to know who and how these price cycles move. Why? AFL Fantasy is different to Supercoach and Dream Team. 3-week price cycle is when they actually change their movement. And so it always gives you that element of visibility of what a player's potential movement acceleration and how big it could be, because you know that it's the third score that is the tipping point that starts that price movement. While for AFL Fantasy, while it's a longer price cycle, the price movement moves after every match. And so with opening round, there was some uncertainty in the community the past 24 hours. Basically, it's come full circle to a degree. And it's now like what we said and heard from the content creators and the gang at AFL Fantasy is it's two price movements that are just happening. And there's one that's kind of banked and then it impacts the second. And the second obviously has a greater level of weighting as it kind of works its way through. Rids, what's been your take on this? Maybe not so much in terms of commentary around it, but more around the importance of understanding and why it's mattered to understand how a price formula and break evens are going to move, given the impact it could have for who and how we select opening round players.
Well, it's a real interesting one because there's a real dynamic to this, okay? So first things first, I want to give a shout out to Jaden once again for the millionth time this year. I'll tell you what, this kid is just a rock star, mate. Like he's across everything. He's so intelligent. It just makes me embarrassed about how unintelligent I am. But like seriously, and what he's done is I just love how he does it. Like the way he does it, he's only just a serious coach, just wanting to know what's happening. You know what I mean? Like, and the way that he does it though, through Twitter and everything else, where he doesn't finger point, he doesn't blame anyone, he just calls it out.
Yeah, he's trying to understand for the benefit of others and himself. Yeah.
Yeah, but what he's doing is he's raising everyone's awareness. And like some of the community really need to give themselves an uppercut, okay? Because really this guy is doing us a service for free that people should be charging for, really. Like, and to give him a bit of grief over doing his, like, it's not really his job, but it's his moral obligation to try and better the education for everyone and try and make things less ambiguous. So it just makes life easier. But long story short, anyone that's played opening round is going to have a hidden price applied to them after opening round, okay? So whether it goes up, whether it goes down. What happens then is the break-evens will then be a great indicator for the community as a whole. And I know people go, blah, 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 break-evens, magic number, price cycles, 5, 4, and then the birdies fly over your head and a red car drives past and someone else's focus is over there. But long story short, the break-evens will tell you who's likely to make those gains. And it's guys like Jaden, and I think it's on his website, Stats by Jaden. You'll be able to get on and actually have a look anyway, whether you got a subscription, whatever else you want to do, but that will give you an indication of what to expect. Radio. So someone like Matty Roberts, radio, he's going to be priced in the 290s or something as his hidden price. He's going to have whatever the break even is, but it's a high negative break even. We're expecting him to go up another 40, 45,000 with a reasonably decent score. That's what you're sort of expecting, but it's not going on his starting price of 240. It's going on the hidden price of 290 from the opening round. I hope I've explained that okay.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense to me. So before we wrap up, Matt, you've been there, done that. In fact, you both have. What's a last minute piece of advice you'd give someone? As you get to that finishing line with 48 hours or so before that rolling commencement of being locked out of the game looks like, from a person that's been there, done that, won that, what's one bit of advice that you would give someone that's listening or watching this episode to be able to go, right, that's going to help me as I head towards lockout?
Oh, look, something that haunted me a bit is don't overthink it and second guess yourself. Like, I know that's pretty general advice, but it can really stuff you up and it can really leave you with regrets. So if you've done your research on players and you've got a good team there, a couple of adjustments, whatever you need to do, that's fine. But don't make big changes. Don't pull someone out you've been convinced on just because someone says something. I think stick to your guns, back yourself in, and, that's how you do well in this game. It's more general advice, but I think it's important because with a lot of groupthink, a lot of stuff going on Twitter, there's a lot of noise, as Rids knows. It can influence your decisions. And I think it's really important to just block that noise out as you're coming into round one and just focus on what you're doing and not what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really great advice, mate, because what Matt's pretty much telling everyone there is select a starting team that you want to own. And you know where you want to take this starting team, Someone else doesn't have that sort of understanding, and that's why they're going to tell you that so-and-so is not a good pick. But guess what? Back in your research, yeah?
Yeah, that's good. So, mate, from you, before we wrap it up, what's the last bit of advice you'd want to give people?
To me?
Yeah, you.
I just MailChimped my marketing.
You MailChimped your what?
I MailChimped my marketing with AI to create an effective marketing campaign in minutes.
No, MailChimp and Way.
Yes, MailChimp and Way. Now I can hyper-personalize my campaigns across email and SMS.
You can do all that with MailChimp.
What did I just MailChimp and say?
MailChimp your marketing with the #1 AI-powered email marketing and automation platform, Intuit MailChimp. #1 based on publicly available data on competitors' customers. Plans vary. SMS available as add-ons. Visit MailChimp.com.
Listen to everything you can. There's I can't tell you about the live stream that's happening tonight with fams and everyone, but it's well worth it anyway, because I don't think we're going to release this pod by then. But if you haven't heard it already, Vams and DT Lemon as well as Bindi will be on a Fanatics live stream this evening. You should be able to cop a pod tomorrow or the next day. There'll be some great advice out of this, okay? Because we're talking 3 high-level coaches. But again, back in your research, really trust yourself. If you think it's Gawn and Grundy, or if you think that you want to go starter English, Be comfortable with how your team looks. And if you're comfortable with it, back in your research, yeah?
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you're saying if you hate the look of your team at the end and the start of round one, like, how are you going to find enjoyment from this thing that ultimately, well, we all want to succeed, is ultimately leading to a level of joy that's meant to come into our life? And if you're looking at your team in round one going, geez, I hate this mess. Okay. Clearly, you've probably not just been reactionary a little bit, but probably have your team locked into what others have told you to do.
And I want to just highlight as well, MJ, do what Matt did last year, yeah? If you cop some bad luck at any point in time, don't go, woe me, and sook for the rest of the year. Guess what? That just presents you with an opportunity to go and trade your way out of it and pivot. Don't be scared to pivot. Don't be scared to change. Don't be scared to say, hey, I got it wrong in my starting squad. This makes me feel like awful about this. Well, pivot. Just do it, yeah? Just change. It's okay. It's a trading game, and it's only a game.
Yeah, some good. So Matt, give us that quick thing where someone's going to have something not go their way. They're going to be this time next week going, this didn't happen. Like we saw it this weekend in Kitty Coleman and Doherty both going down with ACL. So we know luck's a huge variable factor for us. For those that are going to need this information on a Sunday night, when something doesn't go your way, talk me through the getting out of the emotion and into the practical mind, which you're so good at doing. Give coaches a little bit of wisdom to walk them through that before we wrap up this episode.
Well, I think it's a lot harder to do that at the pointy end of the year, because when that happens at the pointy end of the year, it really does hurt your chances if you're in contention. But if we're talking early on, which is what I think we're talking about, I don't think it hurts you as much. Yeah, it might put you behind 80, 50, whatever the point difference is, but it also gives you an opportunity. So I just see it as an opportunity. It's like, well, I actually can trade into someone now that someone else can't because they're stuck with their premium. They're not going to want to waste the trade that way, whereas I can jump on someone who's that guy who looks really good, who I think I can jump on early and get a step ahead of the rest of the competition. So there's lots of opportunities when that happens. So I don't think it's season over, as some people say. It can make it harder to come back. But if you make the right moves, it can catapult you. So I don't think it's season over. I think just look at it as opportunity and just get on the right guys from that pivot and you'll be fine.
That's some good advice.
You think about that?
Yeah.
You think about that advice, MJ. You think about that, okay? So Matt had Josh Kelly go down. Matt had Cherry go down. What did he do? He went and made an unconventional restructure of his team that people frown on. Yeah, we frown on that. But you know what he did? He traded out Kelly to Setterfield or whoever it was at the time, and then went Cherry up to English. How many people, how many experts on Twitter would have said, oh, no, that's you. Oh, geez, I don't like that. I'll tell you what, it worked. And that's the whole opportunity.
Another thing, Rids, that was joined with that is in my backline, everyone started Andy McGrath, and I was really looking at him. And because that injury to Cherry happened early and I knew I needed more cash to get to English, I faded McGrath and a few other expensive ones and put Day in there because I liked him anyway. And that was the convincing thing to get me over the line with Day. So it was a little bit of luck that way that those injuries helped me to make that decision, and it gave me more cash to get English. So it can really work for you. It's not the end of the season. Round one is just the beginning.
Yeah, that's some brilliant advice. I've been so happy that I've been able to spend this episode chatting with you both, because you don't just give good advice or have good strategy concepts in different formats. You have achieved it. You have won it. You have been where so many people have wanted to be. So I hope people have been able to draw out some of that great wisdom you've shared with us. Matt, it's been a privilege having you back on once again, man. We know we're going to see you across the season throughout the AFL fantasy community, jumping on some of the podcasts with us, mate. We love having you part of the panel, and good to have you back on this episode, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always good fun talking AFL fantasy footy. I don't have my own team in this year, but I'm going to be very interested to see how my friend Rids goes, and I'll be following closely the whole season.
Oh, I've heard some assistant coach rumors. Let's not be worried about that. But not just for Rids, but a lot of people are coming to steal your brain going, Can I bounce this idea from you, Matt? Can I bounce this? And understandably so. So you might be assistant coach to about 50 different people by the end of this season. And Reed's, mate, as always, a pleasure chatting fantasy footy with you, mate.
Well, mate, I've heard what he's charging at the moment to be assistant coach. I've had to go and apply for 2 second mortgages on the house. I've had to go get a second job. It's just ridiculous how much this man's charging right now. But yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to everyone.
It's worth every penny, that is for sure. Hey, if you've been enjoying the content you've got from us this pre-season, the good news is still at least one more episode to go, that Q&A. All the details for that you can find across our social medias and follow through us there in the description of this episode. On social media, we've also posted our official open leagues, so you can get involved in those and take yourself on against the followers and fellow coaches, panelists, and see if you can rank number one in our official leagues. Our rookie guide is out and our opening round review episode is out. They are for Patreons and also for our Spotify subscribers. If you want to get those run through season long. The round reviews, the rookie guide is there to help you. All the details to join our Patreon you can find in the description of this episode. And that is it. Your preseason is almost done. Thursday night is just moments away. The lockout starts to roll through, and then Sunday night, it opens up for us and we get into the trade cadence. Thanks for being a part of the journey with us this preseason. We hope you've taken away a lot. We hope you've learnt a lot, and hopefully it's sharpened you up as a fantasy footy coach. And we can't wait for footy to be back and fantasy footy to be back sitting alongside it. It all gets underway this week. We wish you all the best.